September 1st, 1983, KQED sent camera crews to KGO Television, KCBS Radio, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Mateo Times. Their assignment was to watch the reporters, producers, and editors at work on what was expected to be a routine news day, just before the Labor Day weekend.
This is Gianna Parker at the San Mateo Times. We're wondering if we can talk to the congressman this morning about this KAL jet. You can't. Where is he? Where is he? Do you know? Are you expecting you might be able to get a hold of him later this morning?
The night before, I'd heard a quick broadcast on the radio that a 747 was missing, and 747s just aren't missing, so I knew we had something cooking that morning.
This is the Schultz. That's what Schultz is saying.
Now is this the latest one that they said they were going to send? This is the right.
Yes.
Okay. We consider ourselves the local paper for the peninsula, for San Mateo County. So even though it was a world story, it's our responsibility to tell the world story in our paper as best we can. Well, why don't we go with Xiao then, see if we can find it.
Xiao's in Central America.
Let's give it some thought.
Let's come up with another angle.
The best we could do would be to call our local officials who are supposed to know these things, such as Congressman Lantos or Congressman Xiao, and say, hey, what's up? This is an international situation. And Schultz is supposedly going to have a press conference. He's going to tell everything he knows. So we're going to have a long story, and we've got some good art.
How do they know it was shot down?
Well, Japan is saying so. They said it dropped off the screen, and apparently they were reading these other jets.
And then Horgan just told me about the Sully being identified as in the barrel murders in San Francisco.
I don't know if he's charged with it yet, but that would be a top story on its own any other day.
Good morning from KCBS News Radio 74. Your news station and the choice of news professionals. I'm Al Hart.
And I'm Chris Brecher.
And here are the headline stories.
The U.S. wants an explanation from the Soviet Union for the shooting down of a South Korean airliner over the North Pacific.
And in a minute, we'll be talking to an expert on Soviet affairs from Stanford.
San Francisco police say they'd like to talk with a former Millbrae policeman about the murders of 3 people whose bodies were found in barrels in Golden Gate Park earlier this year.
Also coming up in the next half hour, we'll be talking with Dr. Lonnie Carton from the Learning Center, the Critics' Choice with Steve Baffrey. There will be business news with Don Wiegand from the Pacific Stock Exchange, plus Stardate and more weather from Bob Holman. Here's Chris Brecher.
The United States is demanding that the Soviet Union explain why it shot down a Korean Airlines plane that had strayed into Soviet airspace. At a news
I would say that in the tradition of Walter Cronkite, we try to tell it like it is. That means telling the news as it happens, not doing a lot of stories that really aren't important to people, but to try to give a good picture of what's happening locally and around the world. We also have bureaus all around the Bay, and we're very interested in local news, primarily because we think the people are.
At a news conference this morning, Schultz said the United States reacts with revulsion to what he called an appalling act. He said there is no excuse for shooting down an unarmed civilian aircraft, regardless of where it was.
Korean Airlines Flight 7 left New York City Tuesday night with 269 people aboard, including Congressman Larry McDonald, a conservative Democrat from Georgia.
August tends to be a very slow month, and that was the first day of September, so we'd come off a month of fairly quiet news days in which there was not a lot going on. But I would say it was fairly typical in this newsroom when there's a big story. It reminded me of the day the Kolinga earthquake. It was the same kind of feeling of momentum and adrenaline flowing.
Once again, 269 people aboard that Korean Airlines Flight 7 out of New York City Tuesday night, now confirmed to have been shot down by a Soviet jet fighter interceptor.
He's going to do the military. He's going to do how the American military responds, how the Russian military responds, effectively the control from the ground. They don't do this on their own. He's got more information than ABC correspondents had an hour ago on television. So he's going to do the military.
The issues that we were talking about.
If I've made a decision, it turns out to be wrong later in the day, I say, whoops, that was wrong. We better change it now before it gets too late, and not get wrapped up in trying to defend something that turns out not to be right. You're making so many decisions in that job. They can't all be right immediately, and what you've got to do is be rational and mature enough to say, wait a minute, that's got to get changed. We've got to change it now rather than wait for 3 hours. Or wait a minute, we forgot something. Somebody else may have beaten us on this, or somebody else has uncovered something, but we've got to go do it now because it's important and our audience needs to know. That's the ultimate concern to me, is that we get the best and most accurate information out to the viewers.
Besides Korean Airlines, how many people are flying that route? Is Pan Am flying that route?
I don't know. That's sort of the polar route from Alaska. I presume a lot of them. That's one of the things Louis is working a little.
893, Gary Webstock. 1401. Yeah, Gary, I think you should, from there you should go to the Reds consulate. There's fairly a lot of activity there already.
We'll air the story, we'll have the latest on the story, but I want that Oak story, I want that racial story, I want the Golden Gate Bridge story. What are we doing about the Golden Gate Bridge strike? You know? I don't know. Does anybody know? That's what our audience has to know tonight. It's more important to them than what happens over there. Local news, that's what this is all about. I don't want all our eggs in one basket.
Imagine my surprise.
Gee, just like Dewey wins.
And the Santa Rosa, I want that Santa Rosa thing.
What's the Santa Rosa?
There were 2 people from Santa Rosa who apparently were aboard that plane.
Oh, that I didn't know.
Okay, let's go through this stuff. As I see it now, we've got at least 4 reporters who will be able to do pieces and another reporter who may be able to do one. Every news department is operated differently. Ours is sort of a headless committee where everybody has their say. That obviously, eventually the buck stops somewhere. In terms of assigning stories, I guess the buck stops with me. But on a given day, if a particular person has expertise in a particular story, the rest of us will listen to that person. These morning meetings are a good place to sort of get a yeasty conversation going where you get some ideas that wouldn't come out of just one person sitting in an office trying to figure out what to do. Finley is doing the military aspects of the thing. He's going to talk about what American rules are about foreign airplanes in American airspace.
And what the hell is he using for visuals?
I don't know what the hell he's using for visuals. He's got miles and miles of stuff, including all sorts of U.S. Air Force video in his military correspondent bureau chief files. You're going to have to repeat some visuals. I mean, I think this is big enough. Let's go on. You can worry about that later. Right now, we just want to make sure that the stuff that we got to do is getting done.
The other plea I got to make, though, is that because the visuals are limited on this story, there's going to be one hell of a load on the art department, on computer graphics and all that stuff. It's all got to go through Carolyn, and it's all got to get coordinated early, or it's going to be a madhouse.
For this appalling act. And with a Space Shuttle Challenger continuing its history making.
Well, good.
No, I think we need to build a time chronology. What time did the Soviets monitor them? At what times did the Soviets shoot them down? At what time did the Soviets send their first reconnaissance jet?
Right.
The Schultz sound bites.
Right.
Schultz illustrates it point by point by point.
Now, where are we on the Russians?
Okay, well, why don't you start with Kevin?
I don't believe that most people get their information from the radio or from television. They know that an airliner was shot down, but they don't know who did it or why it was done or why the airliner was where the airliner was. And I think people continue to look to the print medium for that kind of information, and will continue to do so.
Okay, we're starting with Bill Frisbee, who's the chief pilot of Pan Am, and he'll give her a rundown on how they plot the courses and how they use the jets and maps to avoid straying into Soviet airspace, which is all automatic. You know before you leave an airport where you're going to go. And each of these course changes as you go across the globe are punched into a computer, so theoretically there's no danger.
So you shouldn't be able to go off route?
No.
Was he here? Is he somewhere we can photograph him and his charts?
Yeah, they're all down at SFO.
We ought to send the camera down there.
Okay, and apart from the Russians, what do we got?
Barrel murder.
Well, how seriously do they take that? They're just going to talk to him about it.
They do. No, they believe it.
They think it. They think so now.
It's real.
Oh, good. All right. We've ever had his picture?
Yeah. I remember what he looks like. Nice looking guy.
Yeah, right.
I need someone to help me with this episode of the plane being shot down by the Soviets, and I thought this was Mr. Foley's office.
So that's an issue.
Would he be the best one to help me on the subject, do you think?
Deadline's a project.
He's not available, and somebody really recommended you. Could you possibly help me? And I don't need to quote you by name or anything, but I certainly need some help in understanding how much you guys fly this route and whether in the past Soviet airspace has been considered especially dangerous and so forth. Could you help me with that? On the understanding, I don't need to quote you by name, I just need help.
Hey, Marshal, is Sacramento doing anything on Duke Majan's not being able to find a house?
He's saying that he suddenly has not found...
Well, Balzar has a piece here in the Times.
There's been a string of wire stories about that for the past 3 weeks. Until he really comes out and does something, I thought I'd wait.
All right, but they're keeping an eye on it?
Yeah.
Good. And is Liebert planning to do anything today on that political party that's going nowhere?
That party apparently split in two.
Oh.
Jesse, which is...
Gee, they never told us.
They weren't. I know, they didn't warn us in advance. Jesse Jackson is apparently going to get commoners' backing, and I've been talking to other members of the party who are furious and say that, they're turning against Commoner and he's a traitor and all that. Since he's not here yet, I thought, well, when we get him in town tomorrow, we'll do one good piece on it.
So we'll just wait till tomorrow. You're not planning anything today, then?
No, I think it's best to do it when they get here and then for the opening of the convention.
Okay. That Korean flight started in New York. And that's why they stopped for fuel in Anchorage.
Yeah, there's a couple of wire stories in there about that.
They don't have a passenger list yet, though?
I just looked.
Hey, kid, did we talk once about a story on this bakery that bakes on Wednesday while everybody else is observing the union?
Yeah, a long time ago.
We never wrote it, though.
No.
I still think it's interesting that somebody bakes on Wednesdays when us bread freaks have had to go with day-old bread traditionally here. And it says in there, I don't know if it's with their lead time, if it's still true, that they're still battling with the unions about it.
Okay.
Okay, why don't you have a read and let me know what you think.
The first question is, do you have any information on the South Korean commercial jet?
Point is it? Schultz said that it definitely was a Russian missile fired by a jet, a Russian MiG, yeah.
Any reason?
They
tracked it for 3.5 hours, and just a few minutes ago, the Korea announced that the thing was on track, on course.
Was there an intrusion on Russian territory?
That's the suspicion.
But Schultz was asked at his press conference this morning whether there was something sensitive at Sakhalin that they were supposed to ignore. Schultz said no.
Yeah.
But nobody knows. There was one congressman involved.
Head of the John Birch.
Yeah, right.
Hi, this is Jana Parker at the San Mateo Times again. I'm calling back to see if there's any statement yet from the senator. Yeah, I'm running into a deadline. I've only got about 20 more minutes. Do you have any idea when he'll be calling?
Barry? Hello. Goodbye. Barry?
Yeah. All right, hold on a second. Yeah, it just came up. Well, they've got the inspectors linked them, but I don't see anything here about formal charges. Okay, this is fine. That's great. We'll get it right out. Thank you. Great.
Tom, I got this guy from the Hoover Institute who's an expert on Soviet airspace. Do you want me to just add it to that, or do you want
Let's do it for the 2-star. Just take your time on it now.
Just do a separate thing?
No, what we'll do is we'll call back the one that you did for the 1-star, and we'll make it better and so forth after we get past it. Okay, so just take your time and we'll
I
get it
don't
back.
think I'll have any trouble with it. I'm not going to change
Basically, we're a local paper. Our strength is in the local news. When a story of this magnitude breaks, the local aspect of our paper is overridden by the public interest in the story. This was such a big story that it overshadowed, for all intents and purposes, any local story that we had going, and we had one or two very good local stories happening at the same time. We had a story on a man who's accused of several murders, a former policeman, Jack Sully. And on any other news day, that would have been the top story. Well, what we did was to make it our number 2 story, and it was the only other story above the fold in that day's page 1.
San Francisco homicide inspectors have linked former Millbrae police officer Anthony John Jack Sully to the deaths of 3 people whose bodies were found earlier this year stuffed in 2 barrels in Golden Gate Park, according to an informed source close to the case. The homicide inspectors notified various Peninsula police agencies Wednesday that Sully had been made by fingerprints on 2 barrel murders located in Golden Gate Park.
All right, Joe, it's up to you.
That was probably the most news-worthy day, the most interesting day we've had in years. We feel the same kind of emotional shock at a horror like this as everyone else does. But we have a job to do, and we just sort of put up the defenses and go about doing our work. No matter how the news breaks, we're prepared. We have enough people to handle it on deadline.
The Soviet attack on a South Korean airliner was criticized in the harshest terms possible by representatives in the nation's capital this morning. I am deeply shocked by the inexplicable and barbaric act of the Soviet Union in shooting down without provocation an unarmed commercial jet airliner, Representative Tom Lantos, Democrat San Mateo, said through his spokesman, Art Brodsky. Lantos is in Hungary, his native country, but was in contact with his office this morning after learning that the jumbo jet with 269 passengers had been shot down. The tragic loss of life is totally and completely without justification, Lantos said.
We pressed the button before. There's no answer, and these people are pretty tight-lipped when it comes to any of this sort of thing. We don't expect really much here.
You always hang around the Russian embassy?
I only hang around the action. I'm called the Eggman. They know me throughout the valley. I sold eggs until I sold too many big ones at a low price, and they threw me out of town. I ran for the vice presidency in 1980.
Yes, this is Sergeant Reed from the Police Department. I would like to speak with you for a moment. Excuse me, I was not able to understand your last message.
I like to demonstrate here, and I have some broadcasters that demonstrate and study already, so I just rushed down here for join them.
What's your name?
My name is Peter Kim.
Can you spell that, please?
Peter Kim.
Peter Kim?
Yes.
How old are you, Mr. Kim?
I'm 30. Next month I'll be 33. I remember the past couple years ago, they shot a Korean airline and they killed 2 people. And this time I really very shocked. And some of the broadcasters said they have some demonstration already started on. That's why I came rushed to come over here. Cannot just sit on my chair. I have to do something because they're so upset about it. So I just rushed to here. So
you didn't know anybody on the plane?
No, it's not relative, nothing, because most of Korean they flights on they departure in New York. So probably a lot of people that live in New York. Probably they are more shocked than I do.
Hi, you come here to demonstrate?
Yes, right. But in the news broadcast they said the demonstration already started, so I hear it, but nobody is here.
No, there's a lot of news persons here.
I see. Yeah, but I better go. Yeah.
No, you don't have to go. What I'm trying to tell you is that you must demonstrate across the street from.
I see. Well, I better go because. Anyways, tomorrow.
If you wish to demonstrate, you may demonstrate across the street.
I see. I'll do. Okay. Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Sergeant, now maybe I can. Sergeant, tell me what happened when you went inside.
Well, I was greeted by Consul Orloff, and I informed him that we'd received a phone call threat of a bomb being placed in this building. At this point, he said that he had had several calls also, that he was aware of the threat, and that they had in fact searched their premises and were confident that it was secure.
Is that sufficient for you?
Yes, it is.
So you'll now leave?
We will now leave the interior of the premises. We'll stay outside.
Sergeant, when he says that he's received several phone calls, are these several threats or just information that...
I understood it to be threats.
So
that was my interpretation.
I see. You're probably right.
I have a press release of the Soviet consulate with the official task report on this incident with the planes.
Can you tell us, and can you read from that for us, for those of us that need the benefit of sound?
No, sir. That's all I can say at this moment. And
it didn't say that anybody shot anything down here.
Well, that's all I have, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is more? I didn't get one.
I don't know.
Oh, sure. Can you say it? Can you say it?
Why they just shoot the passenger aircraft? They can see it. If they don't answer.
Have you talked with people from your embassy?
No, I haven't talked to them. Yeah, I just called them and find out what they're gonna do. And I believe the major demonstration goes on tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock right here.
2-1 mark. Officials at the Soviet consulate say no comment to questions about the downed Korean airliner. This is Jerry Wilcox at the consulate on Green Street. Police have been here all morning to guard against trouble. There have been some scattered incidents of people yelling obscenities in the direction of the consulate.
And another man in an expensive Cadillac protesting outside the Soviet embassy. That's a different segment of society. Those are the people who elected Ronald Reagan president.
I would hope that our reporters are sophisticated enough to say, if they go to a demonstration, there are 18 camera crews and 5 demonstrators, to say, we were here today and so were all the other reporters, and there were more of us than there were of them. That should be a part of the story.
Now, a short time ago, a Korean-American named Peter Kim arrived outside the consulate. He said he was so upset that he felt he just had to do something, so he came here.
Yeah, I go back in the fight against them. Yeah, sure. It is murder. It is murder. That's why I come here for.
There have been a few scattered incidents here today of people shouting obscenities at the building, but nothing serious, and police do remain on the scene. This is Jerry Wilcox at the Soviet consulate on Green Street.
I called everybody I could to find out what was going on. And I couldn't believe that my father was there on that plane.
I want all of this.
And then at roughly 9 o'clock this morning, my father's wife called me from Philadelphia and said the State Department called her And transfer that yes, it did happen.
Back up just a
And no
tiny
one
bit.
knows.
Where she says at roughly 9 o'clock.
Okay, we'll probably take a couple of major cities here as reference. Tokyo, obviously. There it is there. There it is. We'll put Tokyo in there. We'll put Seoul in here. We will label this USSR.
How do you do? I'm sorry if we've delayed any of your departures or anything. This is my camera crew, John Johnson, cameraman, Dwayne Brano.
It turns out that I'm ready to go anyway, so it works out fine.
Okay, Joyce, I'm rolling.
Okay. Describe what happened to you.
Well, I was going over to a friend's late Sunday night, and...
Let's start one more time. I blew it. Hold on. Can you turn down your TV?
Sure.
By any chance? Thank you. Great.
What happened to you Sunday morning?
Well, I was stopped, asked for a cigarette, and pulled out my pack of cigarettes, and then I started to pull out a cigarette and pushed me against the wall when I was walking by. And all I could think of was, get on top of that car, maybe you can get them to drive off with you. So I climbed onto the car, I was up on the hood, and I didn't know it then, but they weren't just trying to pull me off, they were actually knifing me then.
See it?
And then there's another in my leg here, and then there's this whole muscle was cut open. When I got into the emergency room, I couldn't see behind me, but I could see that was parted and hanging open. Not that I could see it from this side. But the gal said she almost fainted when she saw it when I got out of the car.
So you were lying on your stomach on the thing and they got you in the back like that, I imagine.
Yeah, more or less. And sometimes I was up actually standing on top of the car.
Okay, we have finished the interview and we are bringing it back. Do you want us to go anywhere else or just come in?
Mobile 11, go do a story with Mobile 11. What's your ETA?
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Okay, great.
We don't count. Okay, mobile 11 clear.
To get started here, I'm going to read a prepared statement, and then we'll field any questions that you might have to the best of our ability and within the limits that we can. On May 3rd, 1983, 3 homicide victims whose bodies were placed in steel drums were discovered in Golden Gate Park. Recently, evidence was uncovered which links John E. Sully with 3 murders. Part of this evidence was fingerprints which were discovered during the course of the investigation. A search warrant was obtained for the business and living premises of Sully, and a search was conducted today by the inspectors from the homicide section.
George, can you give us any specifics at all of what you found, how you were able to link him with this?
We must have gone through literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of prints to search. We probably would not have gotten him because he had never been arrested for any crime, and it was lucky that we got what we did.
Any motive in the murder?
Right now we feel that the motive is what we thought from the very beginning, drugs, and probably there were some sexual overtones there that we really don't want to go into that part right now.
What kind of guy leaves bodies in barrels? Why doesn't he just dump them in the bay?
A weird guy.
Well, I mean, all of these murders are real visible. I mean, he dragged the woman on the road, he left her there, you know.
Well, that's a question we may never find out, unless he wants to tell us that.
Do you think Sully has some sort of fetish for prostitutes? Someone wants to get rid of them?
That's a possibility.
The ex-policeman from the peninsula who is charged with the murder of that young lady who he dragged along accused of dragging along behind a car to erase her features, is now the prime suspect in the murders of the 3 people found in the barrel in Golden Gate Park, and at least 1 other murder.
I think that maybe there could be an interesting annals of crime type of thing about the persistent search after it was sort of dropped out of the public eye altogether.
There have been some minor demonstrations at the consulate during the day. There promises to be a larger one tomorrow. And there was even a bomb threat, which turned out so far to not be a bomb.
What do you mean by minor demonstration?
Apparently small groups of people have gathered sort of to yell at the consulate, people driving by, honking their horns, screaming, shaking their fists.
These are not organized things.
No, they do say there may be an organized one tomorrow by the Korean community. So far, the biggest crowd at the consulate has been composed of the news media, which have outnumbered the demonstrators, but it's early. And also, we've talked to aeronautical technicians about the navigational gear and the other equipment they use to keep away from the Soviet airspace. We've talked to a couple of Pan Am pilots who commonly fly that route on Red 20, and who I guess tell us their experiences along the same line.
Well, I think the last thing is sort of the best thing to peg the whole thing on, you know. A guy who flies that route actually tell how it is and work into that sort of narrative as much of expertise as you can. I'm still curious about what happens in Russia, in Moscow, on a day like this. You never get the sort of the mood thing from any of those guys.
Big cars driving around, people rushing around in the buildings.
Either because nothing is happening or they don't allow anybody to be where something is visible. But for what it's worth, I don't really hold out much hope we get it. I think, why don't you tell LA Times and New York Times that we're interested in that kind of sidebar. Okay.
Bob, let me know if there's nothing on the John Birch Society. Okay.
Get me some planes and I'll do what I can with them.
All right. Okay, thank you. We're just...
Great, okay. All right, sounds good, bye.
We'll be using some tape that you're recording off the net feed soon, and let me know if you get anything else for the pre-tax session.
Would you repeat that first part?
Okay, and Chiron Flush left.
And now, Channel 7 News with Van Amber, Sherry Jensen, Keep Getting With Weather, and Jim Salaney with Sports. Date is September 1983. Yes, it is.
We're not giving you the months, we're giving you the Chronicle.
Okay, is Karen set? She's on the state line. And I'm Stan Bunger in the KCBS newsroom. In San Francisco, officials at the Korean consulate are calling the downing of the jetliner a barbaric act. They are calling on the world's nations to join together in condemning the Soviet Union. With lightning speed, the state Senate has given final approval to a big pay raise for the governor, other constitutional office holders, and state lawmakers. News Radio's Karen Stanley on the line live now from our state capitol bureau. Karen?
You know how much I have? Do I have 25 seconds or 20? Hi, Pete Wilson in the Channel 7 newsroom. Reaction to that Soviet action to destroy a Korean airliner, killing 269 people on board, continues to be worldwide outrage tonight. The Soviets saying now they were only trying to help the plane out of their airspace. We'll be live at the Soviet consulate here in the city. We'll talk to military experts who give possible explanations for the action and to the relatives of some of the victims. All of that coming up beginning at 5 on the Channel 7 News tonight.
That was just live.
Date airs. Date airs.
It's 14 before 4 o'clock. Let's go to KCBS Traffic Central and George.
Well, good afternoon, Michael. Already in Contra Costa County, we have word now that in the Concord area, at Monument on 680 again, there's a big rig that lost its load. CHP not sure which direction it was traveling at the time that it happened. Stay with us here at KCBS News Radio 74. We'll keep you updated just as soon as we have any more information. Go.
It's going on now. Live it spectacular.
What's on the Nighttime Magazine?
Nighttime Magazine, this is Emergency Care Month. Interestingly enough, we're going to be talking to the guy who's the head of the National Emergency Care Organization in Los Angeles.
What services do you use at ADP?
This is Bellingham, Studio C.
In Contra Costa County.
Due to our policy, CBS, about air disasters, we're suspending air commercials, right, for 24 hours.
Is there a major report that CBS is doing a report to?
If you haven't subscribed to the Chronicle in the last 60 days, call 777-7000 and get 2 months for the price of one of Northern California's best-read newspapers.
Oh boy, let me tell you my problem, okay? Yeah, and I'm on a deadline right now. I got about 5 minutes to finish another story, so I really haven't got time to chat. Dan, is the consulate in the Presidio Heights or Pacific Heights?
Which consulate?
The Russian consulate?
Pacific Heights.
Pacific Heights?
Yeah.
No, hold on. It's on green, right?
Yeah. Pacific Heights.
Locally, what's going on with this massive grape harvest? How is that affecting everything? But that's not going to drive the prices down, huh?
How you doing?
I don't have a story here.
Oh, come on.
You know, there'll be a story, but I can't make it. I'm having a hard time finding something interesting enough in the lead to get someone to read under it.
Yeah, well,
it's sort of a travel story.
Yeah.
And I might.
It's the problem with information. You got to make them read the damn information.
I'm going to label this the R20 thing. Should I still label that? I haven't put that on here.
No, because they're going to say that...
We're just going to label this as scheduled flight path.
Right.
Okay.
Cynthia, you're going to call Minetta at 45? I will. Minetta confirmed, 45.
I'm going to call Minetta now.
All right, you call Minetta.
Doesn't give the length with us, right?
No, it is 15 minutes. It'll go to 45. At least I hope so. So we'll call Minetta now, just in case.
All right, if he gets the call through, I'll get someone to tape it and we'll evaluate it. Okay, it's unlikely we'll get it through. Just in general.
Yeah,
saying that they
calling in
what
general,
happened.
yeah.
What, try to
There
find
will be
out?
no cancellation of flights.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, what? What? Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, the only ones in the world tonight who are disagreeing with what Schultz says are the Soviets.
Because I want people to understand that, that's a big airplane.
Yeah.
There's plenty of stuff.
Instruments, huh?
Oh yeah, he shot it. It's all in there. That wouldn't be a bad shot to use.
This is the cockpit of a Boeing 747 set up for very long transoceanic flights. Of all of its hundreds of systems, life support, guidance, electrical, and hydraulic.
And we'll check our live camera outside the Soviet consulate. The full story at 5 and 6 right here on Channel 7 News. Well, one-story news day.
Okay, we got a bunch of here's A2 number 1 and 2. Don't be nervous. Mike, do you want A2 number 1 and 2? Candy, don't go up yet. Take these. Well, see, and Fitz also has a good story on that Millbrae cop, so he could go on further on beat check. Newsroom. Newsroom. We're having a problem here. I've got Tim Callis waiting for me to find out if Fitz is going to fly out. Is it still busy? All right, well, let's leave it. All right, you throw to Fitzmaurice, and Diane, you throw to Karen Stanley. All right, you guys ready? All right, hang on. You've got Taylor B. Check on 7-5, Callis on 7-6.
Coming up on the 5 o'clock hour at KCBS San Francisco, for Mike Pulsifer, I'm Stan Bunger.
With Don Mosley.
And in the next half hour, these are our headline stories.
The Korean consul in San Francisco says the Russian attack was barbaric.
There are angry demonstrations outside the Soviet consulate.
The legislative pay raise bill gets through the state Senate.
Also coming up in the next 30 minutes, Don Klein with sports. Bob Hallman checks the weather. It's nice. Don Wiegand with the business news. George with traffic. And our beat check reporters check in from around the bay. CBS News Time, 5 o'clock.
CBS News, I'm Stephanie Shelton. There's been little doubt all day, but there's no doubt now. The State Department says there were no survivors. All the 269 people on board Korean Airlines Flight 007 are dead.
The United States reacts with revulsion to this attack. Loss of life appears to be heavy. We can see no excuse whatsoever for this appalling act.
Good evening. The only country in the world disagreeing with Secretary of State Shultz tonight is the Soviet Union, the object of his verbal attack today because of their military attack yesterday on a defenseless commercial jetliner. Korean Airlines Flight 007 was on its way to Seoul
by way of New York and Anchorage, Alaska, when somehow it strayed into Soviet airspace. After monitoring it for several hours, a Soviet MiG fighter shot it down. 269 people on board, including at least 15 Americans, one of them a congressman, are feared and presumed dead tonight. That is the situation as the free world knows it. The Soviet people are being told something quite different.
We have a voiceover, unit 5 from Terry, Mike, Hewitt.
Also on the flight was a doctor from New Jersey, his wife and daughter. New Arvin. There's much more to this story that's dominating our news today.
I think we're behind here. We need a new Arvin.
54. Arvin 52.
Oh, Terry, you're in charge of any kind.
On Arvin, I need a 53 now.
That's happening. They're probably turning the other cheek and say, well, okay,
Ready, Matt? Take Matt.
Russia, you've done.
Good afternoon, 5:06 at KCBS San Francisco. Stan Bunger here for Mike Pulsifer. Don Mosley along with me this afternoon, and it's time for the Afternoon Beat Check, sponsored by Home Savings of America.
San Francisco police are maintaining a vigil outside the Soviet consulate here in San Francisco as reaction continues to pour in on the downing of the Korean plane. I'm Diane Callis. Police say there has been no trouble there this afternoon. Karen Stanley has more on Beat Check now from Sacramento. A huge pay raise bill for the governor, other constitutional office holders, and lawmakers was rammed through the state Senate today in almost record-setting time, and now goes to the governor's desk for his signature. And Barbara Taylor has San Francisco news.
Mayor Feinstein has discarded the idea of saving Candlestick Park and is now saying that she wants a new stadium built. Mayor Feinstein hopes to break the logjam in the hotel union negotiations by sitting down with hotel management tomorrow afternoon, just a few hours before the workers are scheduled to go on strike.
This is the cockpit of a Boeing 747 set up for very long transoceanic flights. Of all of its hundreds of systems, life support, guidance, electrical, and hydraulic are the most important. Now, the guidance navigation system is a high-tech marvel using a large number of repetitive systems to avoid virtually any chance of failure.
It's 5:15 and good afternoon from KCBS San Francisco, where an award-winning news team keeps you up to date around the clock. Ruth Wurzberger and Cynthia Louie handling the editorial chores this afternoon. Jim Lauder is at the controls. In for Mike Pulsifer, I'm Stan Bunger. And Don Mosley, it's been one angry comment after another here in San Francisco today.
Yes, and in a blistering comment this afternoon, the Korean consulate in San Francisco has condemned the Soviet Union for shooting down the Korean Airlines jumbo jet. Consul Tae-hee Park called it a barbaric act.
The shooting down incident of the Korean airline is a grave violation of international law.
Outside the consulate building, there were shouts of outrage, as we hear now on the scene from KCBS newsman Jerry Wilcox.
One angry man shouting, "We've got to stop these murderers," yanked open the steel front gate at the consulate. The gate was supposedly locked. Several hours later, a young consular employee emerged and handed out typewritten copies of the TASS news agency report, which said the Soviet MiG fighters had tried to give the plane assistance, but that it did not react.
No, sir. That's all I can say at this moment. And
it didn't say that anybody shot anything down here.
Well, that's all I have, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
The curious and the angry and reporters and a few policemen kept vigil outside amidst frequent speculation that eavesdropping devices inside the consulate were picking up every word spoken out in the street. Jerry Wilcox, KCBS News, San Francisco.
At the Soviet consulate, there was no reaction for most of the day, but there had been hecklers and protesters from the moment the news was released. San Francisco police were called in, as usual, to keep the peace.
We had one incident where a man parked the car, walked up, shook the gate. The gate came up, and he screamed obscenities and hollered murderer, and we escorted him away. That's been it. There's been no violence or anything.
And later, while we were waiting in vain for an official comment from the Consul General, another protester, out of the same mold as the man in the Mercedes, drove by.
Asshole!
Demonstrations in front of the Soviet consulate are certainly nothing unusual, but as one San Francisco policeman assigned to this beat told me today, this is the first time they've had a man in a business suit driving a Mercedes and another man in an expensive Cadillac protesting outside the Soviet embassy. That's a different segment of society. Those are the people who elected Ronald Reagan president. And also a South Korean demanding of his country and this one that Russia not go unpunished.
That's all you gotta do.
At the Soviet consulate in San Francisco for Cover Story, Gary Rebstock, Channel 7 News.
2 members of the space shuttle crew are lifting weights in space. Astronauts Richard Truly and Dale Gardner used the shuttle's 50-foot mechanical arm to raise a space dumbbell the size of a truck.
Okay. Thank you, Larry.
Here are some of the super big dollar winners. Over 5. James. Nice to meet you. We raised our eyebrows over the title Controversy, and then we swiftly pumped down over $60 million in receipts.
One story a day.
Will we nuke them?
More reaction, more information coming in on that. Jerry Jensen and Pete Wilson are next with the latest on Channel 7 News at 6.
The Soviet Union owes an explanation to the world about how and why this tragedy has occurred.
The eyes of the world are focused this evening on a tiny sliver of ocean between Japan and the Soviet Union. That is where Korea Airlines Flight 7, a 747 jet, disappeared while on what was supposed to be a routine flight between New York and Seoul, South Korea. Flight 7, with more than 260 people aboard, apparently was shot out of the sky by a Russian missile when it strayed outside authorized airspace. The best information we have this evening is that Russian pilots blasted that airliner out of the sky, killing all of the passengers, including several Americans.
Commercial airline pilots who fly the route used by the Korean jet shot down over the Soviet Union consider it one of the most navigationally sensitive in the world. Some pilots and spokesmen for American carriers said they could not understand how the plane could have drifted into Soviet airspace. The sophistication of the inertial navigation system and the cross-checking of information by the pilot and co-pilot, and the fact that there are 3 of those systems, assure adherence to the selected track.
They cross-check each other. Yeah, correct. So, but do you think the way this reads now, it's confusing the cross-checking? It's not just the fact that there are 3 systems, it's the fact that
And the cross-checking,
The fact that there are 3 of those systems assure adherence to the selected track, said Terry Hickman, a Pan American World Airways pilot who has flown the route since 1968 and who is vice chairman of all Pan Am pilots belonging to the Airline Pilots Association.
Leaders of the Bay Area Korean American community brought their anger and condemnation over the downing of the Korean civilian jetliner to the Soviet consulate in San Francisco. 24 reporters and photographers staked out the building all day, but the only official response from the consul was a task dispatch. One of the handful of angry protesters who appeared at the consulate during the day was Peter Kim, 32, a Korean-born businessman who has lived here since 1973. "I'm very upset about what the Soviets did," he said. "I just had to come here to show what my people feel about this. I'm so upset. I can do nothing, but I just can't sit at work. So I came here."
The news of the downed jumbo jet hits very hard here in the Bay Area this evening. Channel 7's Ron Tank has been with the family in Petaluma.
Roughly 9 o'clock this morning, my father's wife called me from Philadelphia and said the State Department had called her and told her that yes, it did happen, and my dad was here. My dad was on that plane.
Really, this is outrageous. I wonder what the rest of the world is thinking about all this.
What do you think?
Oh, I'm mad. Very mad.
I think anybody who was affected by this incident is very, very angry.
In Petaluma, Ron Tank, Channel 7 News.
We want to continue our coverage now of this entire incident, the Korean airline incident, the Soviet shooting down of that airliner. And we have Mark Coogan on the line now. Mark is a reporter who has been in Santa Barbara through the course of the day, the Western Lighthouse, just to find out exactly what is happening and the way they're dealing with the entire incident. Mark?
Well, we have this late-breaking word. Presidential Press Secretary Larry Speaks has just announced now that President Reagan is going back to Washington tomorrow morning.
There's no question that the advent of electronic journalism has answered the what question very often to readers, listeners, and viewers. But has remained largely for newspapers to answer the why question and the how question. It's a frustration we have all the time. We live with it every day. We know radio is going to beat us to what has happened. Radio is limited by time, so they don't cover a hell of a lot. But anything they want to, they can tell what happened like that, and we can't. But we can tell how it happened, and we can tell why it happened.
Jack, we're saying flat out the Russians knocked off.
Say flat out it knocked them down.
There is more news, and here's part of it. After 4 months of work, San Francisco police say that they have the man who killed 3 people and stuffed their bodies into barrels in Golden Gate Park. A 39-year-old former Millbrae police officer is their prime suspect, and police say he may have been involved in even more murders. David Louie has more on that story.
It is looking like sex, drugs, and rock and roll may link 39-year-old Anthony John Sully to more than the single murder charge he is facing in San Mateo County.
Police said 3 additional counts of murder will be filed next week against Anthony J. Sully, 39, of Burlingame, an electrical contractor. The warehouse where Sully lived in a small apartment has been the target of a week-long search by investigators from San Francisco, the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, and South San Francisco Police since he was arrested last Thursday.
A man in San Francisco is very lucky to be alive this evening. George Fish says
What if we wait 2 minutes?
men stopped him last night to bum a cigarette, and suddenly they slammed him up against the wall to rob him. And that's when Mr. Fish saw a nearby car as his only way to escape.
Get one out of water.
We take them, we'll take them right after this.
Jerry.
And then these people the 2 assailants were still trying to get at me. And I didn't know it then, but they weren't just trying to pull me off. They were actually knifing me then.
In football, running back Carl Monroe of Utah, waived earlier in the week by the 49ers, has been re-signed, adding a 5th back to the San Francisco offense.
Hi, this is Randy Schultz at the Chronicle. Do you have any unnatural deaths over there that we need to know about? Okay, thank you very much. Chronicle here. Do you have any activity over there in Concord that we need to know about? Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Scott, do you have that map that has the warning on it?
Yeah. Don't worry about it. 3W, let them worry about it.
The South Bay 84 to 86. Remember, on those numbers, I'm conservative. When we start to warm up, I may be as much as 2 to 4 degrees low.
So, sunny and warmer days through Saturday, and yes, I know, Jerry, what about through Monday?
Through Monday, it looks like it's going to stay the same with the return of only patchy fog by Tuesday. Our letter from home today, activity point is 8 years old and goes to the Los Alamitos School, and that's in San Jose, and it's a beautiful picture of a palm tree.
And somebody collecting coconuts. Before you ask, when the 49ers win is the answer.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much for the answer. That's our news for now. Stay tuned for ABC World News Tonight. And join us tonight at 11 o'clock for the very latest on that Korean plane incident. Thanks for being with us. Good night.
All the things that we were discussing about that piece, I think it wasn't finished. It was great.
Got away with it then, right?
Huh?
Got away with it then?
Yeah, the only problem was that particular word.
Spying?
No. We're talking about something
For assholes, you cut that out, right?
Rectal passage, yes.
Yes.
That got excised between the 5 and the 6. And I had to, I approved it on the 5, and it turned out that I was told that was not correct. And so we looked it on the 6.
I don't blame you. I heard it in my earpiece. I heard the edit, and I thought, I wonder what happened to my word there.
Yeah.
But I don't blame you at all.
Yeah.
Jerry?
Yeah.
You were relatively pleased?
Well, for a one-issue show, I thought it was fine. A segment was terrific. The open was terrific. I was told to come back to 2, and that's why I did. So you might check with whoever it was that gave that.
Okay. It must have felt more uncomfortable than it looked.
It looked fine.
It looked
Well,
fine.
it didn't feel that uncomfortable. It was just, I just did what I was told. That concept was really nice. I like the cold opening, and I like the flow right into everything. And it's terrific. I think whenever you can do the whole A segment on a story.
Yeah. Well, we certainly covered it from soup to nuts. There's no doubt about that. Let's do follows. What do we want to do? We've got the consulate demonstration tomorrow.
That's right. I think we have to be careful about the privacy of the North Bay family that had, whose father was on that plane. On the other hand, it's a good, strong local angle. They're going back, to Philadelphia, I believe? Yeah. We should probably arrange to get a piece out of there, or go back with them, I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised if Reagan doesn't invite all the families to Washington.
By God,
that's a wrap.
Strike the lights. I'll tell you, that's a day and a half.
Yeah, that was a day and a half.